Wolves are in the market for a goalkeeper, it appears. They are currently linked to Lazio goalkeeper Christos Mandas. In this video, I'm going to be speaking a bit about Mandas, why I think he'd be very, very good under Rob Edwards and for Wolves in general, and also why I think they should be in the market for a goalkeeper rightfully. So let's get straight into this one. But before we do, there are 67% of you who watch these videos who aren't subscribed. So if you're not subscribed already, just click the subscribe button below. It is free. And like the video if you do enjoy it as well. It really helps me out. I'd very much appreciate it if you could do all those things I've just mentioned, and let's get straight into this. Now, Christos Mandas is a really interesting link for a few reasons. Now, in terms of a goalkeeper, he will be relatively cheap. Now, Lazio are open to selling, given the fact that as soon as Maurizio Sarri came into Lazio, he decided to make Provedel his number one again. Now, very interesting because ultimately, he's not really given Mandas a chance at all, to be honest. And he's a goalkeeper that I think he needs to be playing. No goalkeeper at 24 years old sitting at Lazio wants to be sat on the bench. They just don't. Now, of course, having that Lazio link and affiliation probably does give him a bit of gravitas in the game, and people are probably looking at that thinking, oh, Wolves are linked to a Lazio keeper here. But when you find out that it is the second goalkeeper, I think it's very interesting. Now, Mandas is a weird one because he has played top flight, of course. He played top flight in Greece. I think he kept seven clean sheets, in 20 games. There and generally it was a really interesting sort of career for him. As you can see here, if we just look, he's got experience, of course, of playing in the Europa League, playing in the Italian Cup, the Serie A, and as you can see here, 7 clean sheets, but he did concede 24 in 20, kept 1 clean sheet in 6 there as well. And generally, let's be honest, it's not the most inspiring record you've ever seen. Of course, as you can see there, 12 clean sheets in 32 for Lazio, which by no mean feat, it's not a bad record, but it's just a weird link to have a 24-year-old goalkeeper who has only played 89 games at the age of 24. Now, you might think, 89 games at the age of 24, that sounds good, and it would be for an outfielder, but for a goalkeeper, 89 games in that period just isn't enough, quite frankly. Most goalkeepers from the age of 18 are playing week in, week out, so I think that's a very interesting thing for us to look at. But I want to break down a bit about Mandas as a keeper, not just talking about how little he's played or, how many goals he has conceded, because let's be honest, Lazio haven't been unbelievable defensively the last few years, as much as they've had a promising fullbacks and stuff like that in the likes of Nuno Tavares, for example, had a really good season in his first year at Lazio. But I do think it's very interesting that we do speak a bit about Mandas as a player and the attributes that he does possess and why I think they would suit in a Rob Edwards system at Wolverhampton Wanderers. Now, as you can see, last season, he did concede 7 goals, but he did play 9 matches, so ultimately he's conceded less than he's played, which is okay. And he has kept 4 clean sheets in those 9 matches again, not awful. And when you look at some of the clean sheets, they are really good clean sheets. And he is one of the goalkeepers, if you have seen, where they've had a really, really impressive few. He's a very highlight reel based goalkeeper for a goalkeeper that doesn't play a hell of a lot. He is crazy, as all goalkeepers have to be. He is very, very crazy, but he is a goalkeeper that does have that confidence, a bit of edge, and he is quite an imposing figure, really. I think my issue with Jose Sarr and Sam Johnson, as much as I think Sam Johnson is significantly better than Jose Sarr, but the issue with both of them is the fact they're not commanding enough of their area. They're not quite aggressive enough for me. I don't think they're particularly great in terms of commanding their 6-yard box and being really authoritative. I think that's one thing I like about Mandas. He screams, he shouts often. He is very much a leader when he is in goal, so I do think that's something that is, it's not a sort of something you can measure by stats, but I do think it's something that it's very important in football. There are a lot of intangibles and things that you can't track in football, but ultimately that is one of them that I think plays a massive part as a goalkeeper, and I want to see my goalkeeper doing that. Now, as you can see here, ultimately kept a clean sheet against Atalanta, kept a clean sheet against Juventus. Some of the saves he made against Juventus as well were absolutely brilliant. I recommend you do go and watch them. Of course, a clean sheet against Cagliari, and again, you do expect that. But generally, he's not an awful goalkeeper. It's just the fact that he hasn't played enough, and that probably will alarm many of you watching this video. But in terms of a goalkeeper, he has a lot of things that I do like. I think he's very, very decent with his feet. Of course, he is an international as well, albeit only made 2 appearances, with the likes of Odysseus Vlachodimos being that number 1 for Greece in goal. You've got the likes of Burkas as well, another goalkeeper that has been called up in the past. But generally, I think you want a goalkeeper that's not too old, and 24 is really young for a goalkeeper, to be honest. You know, most goalkeepers play until they're about 40. I think that's one thing I like. He's got experience of being at a top club. He's got experience of being a number 2 and a number 1, so I do think that's important. Obviously, he was a number 1 at Atromitos and also at Crete, of course, as well. So, again, number 1 experience in any league is still decent to see. I get it, it's not the most inspiring thing in the world, but it's another link to a goalkeeper that we had to discuss because it has been linked a fair bit. It's led to believe that, you know, some Italian outlets, whether you believe them or not, I personally don't, but it's led to believe that Wolves had a bid rejected in the summer of around 17.3 million euros. I don't personally buy that, but Lazio have come out and said very recently, funnily enough, that they're not willing to just loan out. You know, they're not willing to just loan him out. They want to sell him. They want to recoup some of the value. They want to get some value back. And to be honest, can you blame them? I mean, you know, Mandas, he wants to be playing more himself. But of course, they don't want a goalkeeper that is unsettled. And most goalkeepers, you know, a lot of goalkeepers are happy being number 2. But at 24 years old, I just can't see that. And he definitely clearly isn't. So I think Mandas, from a tactical standpoint, opens up a hell of a lot. And I want to just discuss that very quickly as well. Now, in terms of as a goalkeeper, it's all right reading off stats and stuff like that, but you have to having actually watched this goalkeeper, and I have watched him, and I'm very impressed with a lot of his stuff, really. I've seen him at points for Lazio, of course. You know, I'm a very avid watcher of the Serie A, but also I think there are a few things that I want to discuss that do concern me. Now, one thing is his height. I think he's 185 centimetres tall, which is just above 6 foot, which, again, my issue with Jose Sarr and Sam Johnson is that they're not tall enough, really. I don't think they've got that much of a physical advantage against a lot of the number 9s. I think they do struggle in that area, and I do think that that's one concern of Mandas. I think you've got to be very careful of that. I do think, though, because he is so mental, probably is the word, but he is so sort of controversial, that I do think he is one of these that, when I've watched him, certainly, he's not willing to throw his, you know, he's not shying away from throwing his head into things or jumping into things and showing that he can leap and generally commanding his whole 6-yard box. That is his area. And he does that well for a keeper that, let's be honest, is quite slight for a goalkeeper these days in the modern game, especially in the Premier League. So that's one thing that will concern you, but I can try and somewhat allay those fears. I do think that is a struggle in the Premier League, though. But as you can see here, one thing I love is this long ball accuracy. Now, of course, the stats look well, but in terms of actually watching him, some of his distributions excellent. Now, of course, you've got to take into context who he's knocking it up to as well. And he's knocking it up to some real slight players again. I mean, Pedro's one of those players that, you know, he often finds his feet, but ultimately he's a player that, you know, he's not the most aerially commanding winger. Let's just say that. I think when you look at goalkeepers and they're kicking, it's very hard to look past who they're kicking to, I think, for me. And I think when you are kicking to players that are so slight, and you are kicking to players that, let's be honest, aren't physically imposing like that, I think it's very interesting. He does go long to Pedro a hell of a lot, or he has gone along to Pedro a hell of a lot in recent years. Of course, Pedro was performing really well at a level when he first came in as well. But I don't want to make this about Pedro, of course. He's obviously got Zaccagni on the other side. Again, a player that he's about 6 foot. I think Boulaïdia, a player that should have gone to Wolves about 1 million times as well. A very slight striker. You've got Isaacson as well. He's more physically imposing in terms of his stature, but again, not the tallest player in the world. And then you look at the midfield, Matteo Guendouzi, about 6'1", I want to say, maybe even 6 foot. Cataldi, not particularly blessed with height or physicality. So in terms of his long distribution, it's so promising that he does often find the feet of these very slight, physically, unphysical players, really. The goals conceded is a massive issue. And when you're talking about a goalkeeper, I don't think it's even worth talking about anything other than that, to be honest. I think goals conceded is a massive issue. And I don't think it's a great signing at all. I want to make that abundantly clear. And I wouldn't like to see Wolves go in for him. That's my overriding take and overriding feelings on this. But it's worth talking about when you've got transfer links. We're going to have a hell of a lot of these popping up in the next few months, of course, heading in to that January transfer window. And of course, he is very impressive when it comes to save percentage. But as I say, he does throw himself at everything, which can be a blessing and a curse as a goalkeeper as well. So overall, to conclude, my opinions are that it's from a ball playing perspective, I get it, I really do. The modern game is about ball playing, and Rob Edwards will want a keeper that can kick. I think out of the two of Sam Johnson and Jose Sarr, let's be honest, neither of them could kick, to be quite honest. I mean, Uh, they're very poor with regards to distribution. Jose Sarr for me is slightly worse, but I've watched Sam Johnstone for years, especially at West Bromwich Albion, and he can't kick to save his life, to be quite frank, and he doesn't give a lot of mistakes away from that. So in terms of a distribution standpoint, I really do get it. I think Wolves should be in the market for a keeper that can kick the ball a bit better, a keeper that can find his man a bit better, a keeper that can contribute in free-flowing attacks more from the back. I do think that's something that's very important, but ultimately they need a keeper that can keep the ball out of the net better than Sarr and Johnson, and he's definitely not a better shot stopper than Sam Johnstone. I do think it's very close between Jose Sarr and him. I think Jose Sarr is very poor. I think he's got poppadom hands, to be quite honest, in certain scenarios, really, in situations. But again, for me, this is a very strange link. I think it very much feels like the Greek and Italian media trying to put something together. Overall, I think it's worth doing a video on to discuss. I think you will be seeing him linked for the next few months until Wolves hopefully have that goalkeeper situation sorted, although I do think Sam Johnstone will stay there for this season. I do think going into the summer they do need a new one, however, but he would not be my man in my personal opinion. Let me know what you think about the Greek goalkeeper. I think it's a very interesting link in terms of it seems quite nonsense. It seems like one of them that's just scraping the bottom of the barrel for a bit of media, to be honest. And we do often see that with Greek and Italian media. So let me know what you think and take it with a pinch of salt as well. Thank you all for watching. I hope you really did enjoy this video. Bit of a weird one, doing a transfer link video in November, but it has been linked a hell of a lot across Italian and Greek media. So I did just want to cover it quickly. Not too long of a video to keep you this evening or this morning, depending on when this video does come out. But thank you all for watching. I'd very much appreciate it if you could subscribe and like the video as well. And I'll see you all in the next one.